Welcome to Political Frontline. My guest today is Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, the leading expert of the Center for Russian Studies, Borys Bazylevskyi. Good morning.
Morning.
Boris.
Morning too.
So, let's talk about the international support of Ukraine. What should Ukraine do to make this support more stronger, more valuable?
To my suggestion, Ukraine is to make herself more mighty, stronger, to demonstrate to the rest of the world that it is capable to fight vigorously, not only with the decisiveness of her soldiers, but with the minds of her scientists, with the mighty of her industry, with the mighty of her economy, and so forth. This is the first step. Of course, some fundamental reforms are to be implemented, and we know that the President of Ukraine and the government of Ukraine are undertaking some important steps, but in the situation of war that is going on in the eastern regions of Ukraine, of course, we do not have much time to rebuild our statehood. And so on and so forth, maybe if in details, we must be cleverer in waging rebuff of the aggression that we have on our territory. We must find some other methods and instruments by which we could get the victory in this present difficult situation.
Can you say about any terms of this victory? 5, 10 years?
Oh, well, I'm not a prophet. I'm not a prophet, but the aggressor doesn't have much time, and we do not have much time because of economic difficulties.
Of aggressor or Ukraine?
Both. Everyone witnesses that there are some problems in Ukrainian economy, and everyone sees that the Russian economy is also not prospering. So in this race, we must be quicker, witter, and cleverer.
There has been many rumors about providing Ukraine with a lethal weapon. Do you really think that Ukraine has a chance to get it?
First of all, we do remember that Ukrainian scientists manufactured a deadly Saturn missile.
SS-18.
Yeah. We know that we have a big group of scientists that are capable to develop the modern weapon. We have industry that is also capable to produce. So
you mean nuclear weapon?
Not nuclear, why? Tanks, motors, guns, armored vehicles, etc., etc. But recently I read that Ukrainian scientists have developed the anti-tank rocket that is equal to the American system, that is Javelin. This is our task. Of course, we should request for the support of the civilized countries, of the democratic world, to help us in this difficult situation. But I am convinced that we must rely, first of all, upon ourselves. What about the rest of the world? Well, everyone thinks about
Business.
his own safety and his own business, economy, etc. We must convince the world that we are fighting not only for the sake of our security, for the sake of our independence. We must bring into the minds of the rest of the world that the war that we have in the eastern parts of Donbass and Luhansk regions is the war for the democracy and for the security of the world as a whole.
Under the wall, you mean Europe?
Not only Europe. The fact is that Russia, by annexation the Crimea and by sending its armaments and troops and supporting mercenaries in the eastern regions of Donbass and Luhansk, has blatantly violated the main principles of the international law, the resolution that defines the term of aggression, etc., etc. And when the attempts are undertaking to revision the borders of Europe, this is the threat to the rest of the world.
Recently, during the Brussels Summit Forum, Mr. Stoltenberg said that it is up to Ukraine to be or not to be in NATO.
Right.
Do we have a chance to apply?
He was right in saying so, because by saying so, he, once again emphasized that the door to NATO is open.
As it was in 2008.
How it could be implemented, this invitation, this is another question, because well, as far as I know, in the 90s, the countries of the Eastern Europe that are now the member states of NATO member states were forced to undertake a lot of legal, military and industrial reforms to be up to the level of
NATO countries.
NATO countries and armies of the NATO countries. Therefore, I don't think that it could happen today or tomorrow. It will take time for us to accommodate to the level of NATO armies. But I think with the time being, the perspective will be quite positive.
What is your opinion about Ukraine's chances for NATO? Do we have a real chance to apply into the NATO?
There are a lot of factors. First of all, we must develop ourselves. And then I think that the political situation is to be appropriate for our acceptance, because you know that NATO is a specific organization where all the member states have the right of veto. So a lot of work is to be done by our diplomatic service as well.
The Prime Minister of Great Britain, David Cameron, said that the Baltic countries can be the next after Ukraine. Do you really think it is possible?
Well, there is a real threat not only to Baltics, because almost every day we see the Russian aircrafts flying over the waters close to territorial waters of the Baltic countries. Recently there were aircrafts not far that were overflying the waters close to the Great Britain or to Ireland. So there is always, as I mentioned, not only the threat to Ukraine, but the threat to the independence of the rest of the world. And of course, Baltic countries, Poland, and all the rest are on the front line and are in danger.
Okay, let's back to Ukraine again. Yeah. How do you assess the OSCE work here in Ukraine? Positive,
you
negative?
See, to understand OSCE, you must know the history of appearing or of how that organization appeared. I am very and rather skeptical as to the OSCE. It is a forceless country organization. It was created, I would say, from the very beginning by, as everyone remember, in the 70s, 80s, as a rather propaganda step of to prove themselves, ourselves, that the peace has been established forever. Unfortunately, those observers that are entitled by OSCE do not have a lot of rights there in the zone of war, or as it is called, the anti-terrorist actions zone. They could only observe, note, and can do nothing more. What is necessary, I would foresee that you will ask about the peacekeeping.
Of course I will.
Peacekeeping forces.
Do you believe in peacekeeping actions?
Peacekeeping forces are very effective if the opposite side, I mean the side that is supported by Russians, are in goodwill. Unfortunately, I don't see such a goodwill, and Russian officials not once stated that they shall not accept the peacekeeping forces. There could be peace-imposing forces, not as peacekeeping forces, but peace-imposing forces. But facing Russians, I doubt that anyone will dare to organize or to formulate such detachments.
We will continue in the second part of our program.
Okay.
My guest today is Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, the leading expert of the Center for Russian Studies, Borys Bazylevskyi. Borys, Polish Foreign Minister insists on Geneva format solution on Donbass. Why he insists on this?
Well,
does this side has any?
It's quite clear because, well, the United States representatives participated in frames of Geneva format. This is the simple answer.
And Ukraine are against it?
And unfortunately, we shifted to so-called Norman format, in which the United States were excluded. I do not know why this decision was taken, but to my conviction is that with the participation of our friends from the United States, our position could be much stronger.
Let's talk about international aspects of Ukraine. What are the international actions that Ukraine must do just to make their presence more valuable, if I may say?
Okay, I have already mentioned that we must become stronger and ourselves.
You mean economy?
We must clean our country. We must fight the corruption.
Do you really think it's possible?
We must do well. Without fighting corruption, it won't be possible to get the victory in this war. And we must become military stronger. I would permit to take several minutes quoting the former, one of the most outstanding statesmen of the 20th century, the former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. And 60 years ago, he said in Fulton, Missouri, that there are two great dangers that menace the world, what he called the two giant murderers, war and tyranny. War, he stated, often results from the designs of wicked men and the aggressive urge of mighty states. Tyranny reigns when the power of the state is exercised without restraint, either by dictators or by compact oligarchies operating through a privileged party and the political police. The Russians, he said, admire strength, but have no respect for weakness, especially military weakness. So this is the answer. And another, I would quote him, if the Western democracies stand together in strict adherence to the principles of the United Nations Charter, their influence for furthering those principles will be immense and no one is likely to molest them. But he warned that if the West becomes divided or falters, then indeed catastrophe may overwhelm us all. Very wise words and very vivid words.
Can we say that this is the recipe to win in this war?
This is a kind of a recipe.
Do you have your own recipe how to win in this war? How to back Crimea back in Ukraine?
Okay, no one doubts that with the time being, Crimea will be returned to Ukraine, because one must not forget that, in the previous histories, all those territories that were annexed by force were annexed by aggressors, sooner or later were returned back to their motherland. So with the Crimea it's quite clear. I have no doubts as well as about the
Do you have any terms?
Eastern territories. I am not a prophet, but I think it won't take much time, and I hope that it will happen during our lifetime.
Some say that Crimea will back when the Russia will perish.
Well, I do not want to speculate about perishing of Russia. I hope that we'll see sometimes the cleverer and more peaceful leaders in Russia.
Does the Ukraine has a chance to sign a free visa agreement with EU in this year?
Free visa agreement?
Yes.
Well, not
as our neighbors, Moldova.
We are waiting for the summit in Riga. The final, mostly final decisions are to be taken. There are some hesitations on certain, on behalf of certain countries in the EU, but that could use that still some military actions are going in eastern parts of Ukraine, etc. But I don't think that it could be a strong reason for withdrawing, or how to say, not withdrawing, but not giving the visa-free regime to Ukraine in the shortest time. It should be understood that, well, it doesn't mean that if Ukrainians receive the visa-free regime, they will be free to go to Europe, for a long time, to work, to live there, etc., because there are some limitations, limits. For tourist purposes, for the purposes of student exchange, for some trips, it will be good, but not for work.
Recently, the Spanish Minister of Foreign Affairs said that international tribunal can consider the Crimea issue.
You mean Hague?
Yes. What do you think about
this? Of course, because Crimea was annexed by means of aggression, and it is proved by the President of Russia himself that he ordered the annexation of Crimea.
So it's not impossible.
So it is contrary to the principles of the international law, and it could be judged by the Hague Tribunal. If, of course, much shall depend, nobody will do our job for ourselves. We must do that job first of all.
Currently, Europe are not ready to tough the sanctions against Russia. Can Europe do something available to support Ukraine in real actions?
Well, Europe supports Ukraine, and we are thankful very much to the leaders of Europe for what they are doing. Of course, we would like to have more. Once, you see, one of the American politicians mentioned that, to teach Russians, one should work quickly and tough. At the same time, also, if we recall Churchill's words, America, when we remember history, when the Great Britain fought Hitler armies, when all the rest of Europe was defeated by Hitler. The Great Britain was left alone, and even America hesitated whether to enter or not to enter the war. Later, they started from the support of Britain, and after Pearl Harbor, they were forced to enter the war. But Churchill mentioned that the United States are very slow in taking some decisions. But when they are taking this decision is right. Let's hope that sooner or later they will take the decision.
On that positive note, our time is over. My guest today is Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, the leading expert of the Center for Russian Studies, Borys Bazylevskyi. Thank you for being on Political Frontline, Borys.
Thank you very much for inviting me.